All right, so let us continue. This is uh, part 4 of chapter 4. Okay, so on the crime scene investigation techniques and procedures. So let us continue on the checklist in the conduct of crime scene investigation. So number 3 checklist is the inspection of the body. So this is done when there is a cadaver or there is death. No. So at the crime scene, you collect loose hair, wads of fibers, and the likes all the time while the body is being inspected. So habang ini-inspect mo yung body during crime scene processing, then inspection of the body, you are collecting it. Huwag yung mamaya ulit. Okay? You collect it immediately. Decide whether to collect the fibers on the free body surfaces, hair, and clothes by taping. Yan. Pwede kang gumamit ng scotch tape. No? Yung scotch tape, meron siyang paste. Pwede mo siyang i-tape, then lift. Okay? You decide. Next is make a note of the signs of death. That is why in chapter 5, no, as we will discuss it, no, there are signs of death na pwede mong magamit or identify. If possible, measure the body temperature and write down the relevant times. Okay? Hair. Are injuries concealed by hair? So you have to check the hair inside, whatever part of the body that have hair, but commonly it is on the head. No? You have to check inside. Baka hindi mo pala alam, there are injuries that is being concealed by the hair. Pero pag kalbo, no need to find a hair. So has hair been torn off? No? Yan. Yan ba ay napuwersa? Alam mo naman pag napuwersa yan or sadyang nahulog yan. Foreign substances. So pag sinabing foreign, these are substances that are different or these are unusual. Check for bleeding in the ears. Importante yan. Kasi pag may bleeding, there is trauma. No, there is serious trauma on the body, especially the head. Then check the conjunctival bleeding. Yeah. Examine the root of the nose and nostrils. Yeah. Check whether there are any foreign objects in the oral cavity. No? Yeah. Baka meron palang sa loob ng bunganga, meron kang makuhang evidence. Then examine the neck for skin scrapings, red spots, and strangulation marks. Examine the arms for bruises caused by gripping and resistance. Check for marks made by syringe. Baka may na-inject, especially in the crook of the arm. Then examine wrist. Yan. Especially dito. Yan, ini-inject dyan. Examine wrist for old or new cuts. Yan, wrist. Then examine the hands and under the nails for injuries due to resistance and for swellings, hairs, and skin fragments. Yan, fingernails. Then cover the hands with paper bag. Yan. Cover the hands with paper bag to facilitate the continued search for the skin fragments, hairs, fibers, and etc. during autopsy. Yan, during autopsy. Examine the front and back of the body and from top to bottom. So you see, examine the front, examine the back, then examine the top from the head to the foot. No? So examine the front and back of the body and another from top to bottom. Okay? Examine the legs and feet. Okay? Examine the legs and feet. Examine if any blood on the soles of the feet and record it, or any marks or injuries indicating that the body was dragged. Yan, dragged. Yan, ano na drag? Pagkahinila yan from one place to another, makikita mo yan kung may gasgas yung likod or any part of the body. Okay? So that is the inspection of the body, especially when there is death. Next is number 4, inspection of clots. Yeah. Describe and photograph visible clothing in detail to be completed in connection with the autopsy. Next, pay attention to creases, damaged bullet holes, blood spatter, dirt position of the body. Examine the packets, examine the packets, make a list of the contents. Huwag mong ibulsa. Describe the presence of blood and any other stains on the clothing. The clothes should be taken charge of in connection with the autopsy. Yan. So tignan ninyo, mostly, no, this part, no, there are always the intervention of medical legal aspect. Next, on weapons naman. So at the crime scene, if there are weapons at the crime scene like firearms and any other weapons that are present at the crime scene, what will you do? Recovered weapons call for especially careful handling for safety reasons, especially baril or firearms, no? Ay, baka maka-aksidente ka pa or baka masira mo pa ang evidence, okay? So hold the weapon by a part with a rough surface or by the strap so that not to destroy any evidence. Pwede kang kumuha ng what is that? What is that? Handkerchief. Then you hold the firearm, then lift it. Or you can use a string. Yan. Ilagay mo doon sa okay. So okay, so again, let me repeat on the weapons. Recovered weapons call for especially careful handling for safety reasons to avoid accidental firing or destruction of evidence. So to do that, hold the weapon by a part with a rough surface. Yeah, rough surface. Okay. So you look for the part na rough, no? Example, no? In a firearm, no? Example dito, that is a rough area. So possible, pag rough kasi yan, no? It is difficult for example sa fingerprint, hindi yan nire-record. But if in the soft surfaces, no? Do not touch it and just carry like that, no? So there should be careful handling, you know? Or kung M16 yan, no? Then kung long firearm yan, then use the strap. You just carry, use the strap to carry it or lift it, no? Or gumamit ka ng string, no? Or ball pen. Then ipasok mo dito sa kanyang trigger guard, then i-lift it, no? Hindi yung kung saan-saan mo yan hawakan. Okay? And always remember safety. All right. Then always check whether there are cartridges left in the chamber before doing anything else. So you have to check it if there are cartridges inside the chamber, no? So that again to avoid accidental firing. Okay? Then never insert any object such as pencil in the bore or the trigger guard. Yeah. Okay? Never insert any object such as pencil in the bore or the trigger guard. So as a trigger guard, it is advisable that you will use a string, no? Maliit to lift it, no? Especially on the bore of the firearm, no? Huwag mo basta insert dito yung bore inside the barrel. Huwag kang mag-insert dyan then lift it. No, that is wrong because you might destroy, no, the evidence inside. Okay. Then never point the weapon in a way that might injure someone with an accidental shot. Yeah. So always remember, no, the safety precautions in handling a firearm. No, always treat firearms as loaded and point it downward and not to any direction. Okay. Then check the safety catch. No, alam niyo siguro ang parts of the firearms like pistol. No, you have to check the safety catch na naka-safety yan. If you are not sure of how to operate the safety, do not handle the weapon. Okay, so those are the checklists, no, that you should do at the crime scene. Okay. So crime scene procedures naman regarding other crimes of violence, such as robbery. So what will you do at the crime scene? Find out as much as possible about the crime before going to the scene and upon arrival. Especially pag robbery yan, no? Of course, commonly ang robbery is ginagawa yan ng armed, no, group of people, no, or armed person. Yan, common yan. That is why kailangang alamin mo bago ka pumunta para pag hindi yung pagpunta mo si iima ka, no? Then baka ikaw pa ang maging victim of that crime, no? So kailangang aralin mo kung gaano kaseryoso at komplikado ang sitwasyon. Take your bearings at the crime scene so that you get a rough picture of the area and what has happened. Yeah. Start keeping an action log. Yeah. Cordon off the area or extend the existing cordon if necessary. The perpetrator's road to and from the scene may need to be cordoned off as well. Yan. So pag alam mo yung entrance as exit, kailangan mo ding i-cordon yan para hindi kung sino-sino ang pumapasok yan because important yan. Especially in robbery cases para alam mo kung paano nakapasok at saan possible nag-exit ang mga perpetrators at para alamin natin kung ano ang gagawin. No? At saan mag-uumpisa. Make sure that a list is made of the people who enter the crime scene. Kasi nga, malay mo, isa sa mga pumasok a possible suspect. Pause for thought and start planning. This is where the crime scene analysis starts. Importante yan in robbery, no? And even in other crimes. Note down your observation continuously kasi magagamit mo yan in the future in your analysis. It is a good idea to use a tape recorder, no? Take a general photograph of the crime scene, film the scene with a video camera. Search for and collect evidence, objects, and reference sample. And search for and collect evidence, objects, and reference samples indoor and outdoor. Yan, sa labas at saka sa unig. Take photographs continuously. Photograph all the evidence before it is collected. If possible, engage a photographer for specialized trace evidence photography. If the robbery was video filmed, or view the video to see where evidence might be found. Yan, pag may CCTV, and you have to view it so that tignan mo ang pwedeng possible na nangyari, and so forth and so on. Seize any video recordings and films in still cameras. Yan, pwede mong kunin in your possession for purposes of investigation. Draw a sketch. Mark the places where traces, evidence, and references samples are collected. Write a continuous seizure report. Find out whether the proceeds of the robbery included bait money. Check the crime scene before you leave it. Make sure that you have not forgotten anything important, such as interrogation reports, memos, and equipments. Other procedures in crime of robbery in the entry road. After a robbery, it is important to investigate how the offender got in. Yan ang importante sa robbery. No? Kasi dan mo umpisahan, baka may nakakita sa isang tao na kahinahinala, they can describe the face, then in that manner, you can establish the suspect. So, therefore, the entry road, paano nakapasok sa area, no? Yung suspects, yan ang kailangan mong establish yung entry road. Okay? Baka, example, may nakakita sa kanya. After a robbery, it is important to investigate how the offender got in. It is important to find the entry road, which is not necessarily a door. Yan. Sabi ko nga, hindi kailangan yung door or yung window ang pinasukan. Ang entry road is pwedeng anong area, saan siya dumaan, papasok sa mismong pinangyarihan ng krimen. Okay? Check the function of the lock and check whether there are any pick marks. Yan. Ask the victim. Find out from the victim what has been stolen and where there are traces of objects being moved by the perpetrator. That is the place to look for trace evidence. Latent footwear prints. Paper on the floor is always of interest since there may be latent footwear print on it. Collect all paper and then look for footwear prints. Yeah, footwear. Especially pag baka may mark ng sapatos, no? Yan, mga footwear prints yan or slipper, no? They may also be latent footwear prints on deskpads, chairs, seats. Magagamit yan. So that is on robbery. Okay? Next is on suicide. Importante din yan because sometimes suicide becomes murder, suicide becomes homicide, no? That is why you have to investigate further and deeper, no, a suicide case, no, to find out if it's really that is suicide or there is a foul play. Find out as much as possible about the crime before going to the scene and upon arrival from the first officer of the scene and any other police officers who are there. Overview, take your bearings at the scene so that you get a rough picture of the area and what was happened. Always bear in mind that a murder may have been committed. Yan. Parati yan in suicide. Take a general photograph of the scene. Film the scene with a video camera. Note down your observations continuously. It is a good idea to use a tape recorder. Decide whether you need help from an expert such as forensic pathologist, yan, para sa autopsy, or biologist para sa toxic analysis or toxicology. Yan. Diyan papasok na naman ang legal medicine. Make a note of signs of death again. If possible, measure the body temperature and write the relevant times. In the case of hanging, cut down the rope so that the knot remains intact for further examination. Kasi yung knot, yung pag siglot. Okay? Wag yun ang i-cut mo. You just cut the rope. Okay? Hair. Are injuries concealed by hair? Yan, tignan mo, baka pinalo bago hinang. Check the bleeding in the ears. Yan, especially pag sa hanging yan. Check for bleeding in the ears. Yan. Check for conjunctival bleeding. Okay, so again, check for conjunctival bleeding. So pag sinabing conjunctival bleeding, so when we say conjunctival bleeding, this is a bleeding in the eyes. No, pag may bleeding sa eyes o wala. So you have to check if there are bleeding, no, especially the blood vessels in the eyes. Pag may bleeding yan, you record it, no? Yan, kasi importante yan. So kasi pag may bleeding sa mata, there are many explanations by medical legal officers, no? Baka may matinding trauma, no? Yan. Kasi pag hanging yung incident, for example, or any other forms of suicide, then it will be used. Baka there is foul play, no? So examine the root of the nose and nostrils. Yeah. Okay. Check whether there are any foreign objects in the oral cavity again. Examine the neck for skin scrapings, red spots, and strangulation marks. Pag sinabing strangulation, baka sinakal or, no? Yan. Examine the arms for bruises caused by gripping and resistance. Check for marks made by syringe, especially the crook of the uh, arm. Okay, so check the marks made by syringe, especially in the crook of the arm. I said a while ago, ang crook is commonly kasi check dito sa banda dito, crook of the arm. Okay, then examine the wrist for old or new cuts. Yeah. Examine the hands and under the nails for injuries due to resistance and for swellings, hairs, and skin fragments. If shots have been fired, collect primer particles from the hands. Yeah. Okay. Cover the hands with paper bags to facilitate the continued search for skin fragments, hair fibers, etc. during autopsy. Examine the front and back of the body from top to bottom. Okay. Examine the legs and feet, any blood on the soles of the feet. Yeah. Describe and photograph clothes in details. Examine the package. Yan. The same din yan sa iba. Okay? Other procedures in suicide, primer particles. If the dead person was shot, it is a good idea to collect the primer particles. Primer particles, okay? From the hands. This may provide an indication whether or not it is a case of manslaughter or murder. Photograph documentation is an important part of the investigation as in all crime scene investigations. Use plenty of film. Sa ngayon, hindi na film ang ginagamit, no? But with the use of digital photography, with the use of memory card. Okay? The chain of events, it is important in connection with a suicide to be able to exclude the possibility of murder or homicide. Yan. Yan lang naman talaga. In the conduct of the suicide investigation, we are proving, we do everything so that to establish that there is no murder, there is no homicide. It is therefore important to be able to reconstruct the chain of events. Yan. Kailangan may crime scene reconstruction. Apart from the collection and preservation of evidence, it is therefore very important to read the crime scene carefully so as to lay a solid foundation you observe for the final analysis of the crime with a hypothetical and preferably proven chain of events. Yeah, pagtagpi-tagpiin mo ang mga sitwasyon, ano yung mga pinagdaanan ng tao, saan siya pumunta, and so forth and so on, sinong nakasama, yan, para makita mo na talagang there is no crime of murder or homicide. Okay? For weapons, in cases of suicide, recovering weapons calls for especially careful handling for safety reasons. Hold the weapon by a part in a rough surface or the strap so as not to destroy any evidence. Always check whether there are any cartridges left in the chamber. Okay, so I hope you know that. No, never point the weapon and check the safety catch, the signal pin, the slide position, and whether or not the magazine is completely pushed in. Signs of death: when an apparently dead person is found, the signs of death must be documented with an indication of the time when the observation was made. It is up to the physician or medical legal officer to establish death. If there is no doubt that the death has occurred, for example, if putrefaction or decomposition has set in order that there are obviously fatal injuries, the dead person may be taken directly to a forensic facility like a crime laboratory. A physician will issue a death certificate. Signs of death are divided into early and late signs. A physician must establish the early signs of death. So that is for suicide. Then for sexual offenses like rape, in the case of sexual offenses, the most trace evidence is often to be found on the persons involved. It is therefore important to treat these persons in the same way as crime scenes. Yan, always remember that. Kasi sa example sa crime of rape, no? Yan, kaya sabi niya diyan, pag ang gawin mong crime scene is the persons involved themselves. Yan. No? Okay, kasi commonly, pag dumaan ng ilang araw, pwedeng hindi mo na mababalikan ang original condition of the crime scene where the rape was happened. No? So, ang magiging crime scene na is yung persons involved. Okay? This is extremely important to avoid contamination. So therefore, you have to take care of these persons. Immediately thereafter, you let them have the proper processes like medical examination and so forth and so on. Find out as much as possible about the crime before going to the scene. Overview, take your bearings of the crime scene. If the victim is a woman or child, immediately refer the matter to the WCPD of your unit for assistance and cordon off the area. Take the general photograph, pause for thought, and start planning. Note down your observation. Decide whether you need help from an expert, such as forensic pathologist, biologist. Yan. Take photographs. Yan. Search for and collect evidence. Write a continuous seizure report and check the crime scene before cordon is released. Other procedures to avoid contamination. Crime scene investigation related to sexual offenses may call for a great deal of work and many types of evidence may occur. Be very careful to avoid the risk of cross-contamination. Next, photographic documentation is an important part once again, and persons involved make sure that both victims and suspects are taken to a doctor as soon as possible to secure forensic evidence. Yan yung sinasabi natin kanina. No, you treat them as crime scene, therefore be careful. You take care of them because they have the evidence. Give the doctor a rape kit, which contains an action logbook and equipment for the preservation of evidence. After the examination, help the doctor to take charge of the person's clots and preserve the evidence generated from the examination. Ask help the doctor by providing information that will make it easier to evaluate what evidence should be preserved. Make sure that injuries are documented and contamination avoided. So that is for sexual offenses like sexual harassment, rape, and the likes. The next kind or incident involved is poisoning. Okay, so in poisoning, where poisoning is suspected, the scene must be searched for remains of the substances that may have been used for the poisoning or information. Ang magagamit yan na part of legal medicine is toxicology. Yan, toxicology. And who is the father of toxicology? Yan, who is the father of toxicology? That is your assignment. About the poison and that was used. If a material like wine, beer, or the likes is to be sent to the crime laboratory for toxicity test, it is great advantage if corresponding reference material, such as an unopened bottle and the same sort, can be sent with it. An accurate description of the incident should be enclosed so that the laboratory is informed, if possible, of the type of poison that may have been used. Blood and urine samples from the victim are to be sent to the crime laboratory for analysis. So those are the checklist, no, of the procedures that you will do at the crime scene as far as those specific incidents and crimes concerned. Okay, so that is on the second part of crime scene investigation. So part three is part three of crime scene investigation is the evidence collection, handling, and transportation. Evidence collection, handling, and transportation. In the conduct of crime scene investigation for crimes of violence and other crimes, the crime scene processing or the evidence collection, handling, and transportation shall primarily be conducted by the SOCO, Specialist of Crime Laboratory. However, in some and common instances, the first responders or the investigators on case may have to collect evidence that might otherwise be destroyed or contaminated if uncollected. In such cases, the collection should be properly handled and documented. The following procedures are set as guide not only for the SOCO team, but may also apply to any crime scene investigator in the collection and handling of evidence. The collection and submission of standard samples for comparison, however, must be done by the crime laboratory. General rule for the collection and preservation of biological materials. Yeah, these are life materials like blood. These are biological. What will you do? Use protective gloves. If possible, avoid touching individuals' smears. Remember that gloves can entail a risk of contamination. Change gloves after handling each kind of material and otherwise as necessary. Use disposable equipment for preliminary test and collection of trace evidence. Cover surfaces, whether materials are to be placed with protective paper. Keep victims and suspects' clothes separately. Avoid coughing or sneezing on evidence materials. That is true, no? Baka yung pang maihatching mo, may palabas ng katawan mo, yan ang magko-contaminate o magiging evidence laban sa'yo. Ah? But now also because of the coronavirus for this pandemic, that is why you have to wear mask. Yan. Kahit hindi naman pandemic, it is also practical that you have to use mask, wear mask, no, to avoid this occurrence. Packaging of biological materials. Importante yan. No? Kasi when you collect an evidence, you have to package it to preserve. Use paper packaging for all biological materials or materials that are soiled with biological matter. Although plastic bags are useful in many and cases, they cannot be recommended for routine use on account of residual moisture. Kasi pag ang plastic bag, nagmo-moist yan. Okay? Separate outer packages are to be used for trace evidence and for clots from persons involved. Do not mix materials or samples from different people. For example, clots in the same parcel. Fold the opening of the bag twice. Yan. Fold the opening of the bag twice and seal with tape. Yeah, Scotch tape. Envelopes should also be sealed with tape. Special precautions. Make an explicit note if a person from whom material has been collected is suspected of having an infectious disease. Prevent contamination by avoiding all contact between collected evidence and clothes seized from people. Packages containing collected materials must not be opened until examination in the laboratory is to commence or start. The only exception is when moist or wet material must be dried or under normal room conditions. And this is the procedure on the collection and preservation of blood. Okay? So, blood on removable materials. Remove the whole object. How to package it? Put each piece of material in a paper packaging and seal with tape. If the material is wet or moist, pack each piece of material in a plastic bag, sealed with tape. Open and allow to dry on arrival at the police station and send it to the PNP crime laboratory in wrapping paper or an envelope. That is for blood on removable materials. Pools of blood. An example, ang removable materials, sample may dugo sa isang bagay like in a cup. Yan. Pwede mong ilagay yan, kunin yan. Remove the whole object. Pools of blood. Yan. Collect blood on some swabs. Yan, you swab it using cotton buds. In the case of larger accumulation of blood, take several samples from various places. Yan. Pag maraming pools of blood in any part of the crime scene, then get different samples from it. Put the swabs in a swab wrapper or folded piece of paper. Package in an envelope. Store dry and cool. Blood in water. Yan, blood in water. Collect on several swabs. Yan. Put the swabs in a swab wrapper or a folded piece of paper and package in an envelope. Store dry and cool. Collect water with a clean pipette, no, or syringe. Yan. Pour the water into a clean, dry test tube with a cork or a vacuum tube with a purple cork. Okay. Then dry blood. Yan. If possible, cut away part of the surrounding material. Put each sample in paper bag or envelope. Keep dry and cool. The same in dry blood. If this is not possible, moisten a swab with water. Rub it until it becomes dark brown or red, or until the swab absorbs all the blood. Put the swabs in a swab wrapper or a folded piece of paper. Package in an envelope. Store dry and cool. That is for blood. Next is the collection and preservation of semen or saliva. So semen or saliva on removable materials, remove the whole object. Packaging, put each piece of material in a separate paper bag, unpacked on the arrival of police station and dry at room temperature, and send it to the PNP crime laboratory in paper bags. Moisten semen, yan, mamasa-masa, or saliva. Collect part of the sample on some swabs. Put the swabs in a swab paper, the same. Then or draw off liquid with a clean pipette or syringe. Yeah. Pour the liquid in a clean or dry test tube, the same. Semen in condom. Pag ang semen is nasa condom. Hindi sperm kasi ang sperm is a part of semen. Semen in condom, close the condom with a clip. Yan, with a clip. Huwag mong isigrut. Yan, narigat na may cut. So, with a clip. Okay? With a clip. Keep in a refrigerator and send to the crime laboratory as soon as possible by refrigerated transport. Okay? Okay, that is semen in condom. Next, dried semen or saliva. Yan, natadry din ang semen. Okay, pag hindi nyo pa alam. If possible, cut out part of the surrounding material. Otherwise, moisten swab with water, rub it until it is saturated. Put its sample in paper bag pag na-cut out. Pag moisten naman, air dry and put the swabs in a swab wrapper or folded piece of paper. Okay? That is for semen or saliva. Next, how to collect and preserve urine. Yan. Urine, yan yung ginamit kay Dasera. Yan ang kinolect ng NBI at in-examine. No? Yan. And they were able to figure out and use it as evidence against the suspect. Collect in a plastic bottle. Yan, hindi na paper bag yan. Collect in a plastic bottle or other suitable container. Keep in a refrigerator. Send it to the PNP crime laboratory and reference sample for drug or alcohol analysis. Collect 20. Pag gamitin mo yan for drug or alcohol analysis, collect 20 ml. 20 ml in 2 test tube. Yan. 20 ml each. So 20 ml in 2 test tubes with screw cups. Yan. May close. Keep the tubes in a refrigerator. Okay? Collection and preservation of body fluids. Any other body fluids not mentioned. Mouth samples. Yan. Mouth samples. Take samples from oral mucous membrane by rubbing 2 swabs against the inside of the mouth. Yan. Against the inside of the mouth, teeth, and top or bottom of the tongue. Yan. So, like that. Put the swabs in the swab wrapper. Then dry smears of blood, saliva, yan, licks, kisses, bites, spit, yan, and semen. Collect with swabs, moisten with sterile water or tap water. Air dry, safe. Vaginal samples, yan. Vaginal samples, collect samples on swabs, 2 swabs each from at least 3 different places. Yan, on the introitus, cervix, and anterior fornix. Kaya pinapasok yan at kinukudkud yan. Put the swabs in the swab wrapper. The same procedure. Anal samples. Collect samples and swabs from the anus and rectum. The same procedure. Put the swabs in the swab wrapper. Penis sample. Yan. Collect the sample on 2 swabs. Moisten with sterile water or tap water. The same procedure. Finger rub, sampling of a suspected perpetrator. Rub the cuticles, yan, and fingertips with 1 moistened swab for each hand. Okay. Samples for drug analysis: alcohol, 10 ml of venous blood in a vacuum tube, no, and 20 ml of urine in 2 test tube with screws cups. Yan. DNA typing from living person. Preferred alternative: venous blood in a vacuum tube. Keep the tube in the refrigerator. DNA typing from a living person, no, must be taken by a doctor. Second alternative, a saliva sample is taken with 2 swabs that are rubbed against the oral mucous membrane and air dry and put the swabs in the swab wrapper just the same. Okay? So tingnan nyo itong DNA from living persons. Preferred alternative is the venous blood. The second alternative is saliva. So yan yung dalawang ginagamit for DNA typing. DNA typing naman for dead persons, blood in a tube. Yan. 1 cubic centimeter muscle sample or 10 hair roots. Yan. 10 hair roots. If putrefaction has set in, it has been decomposed, then take 1 cubic centimeter bone marrow sample. Yan. Bone marrow. Kasi nga na agnas na. Okay? Collection and preservation of fibers. Fibers naman yan. Fibers on removable object, remove the whole object and the same in wrapping paper or paper bags. Invisible fibers on large objects, pick up the forceps. So use forceps. No? Yan ang procedure. Invisible fibers on large objects, take about 15 centimeter lengths of tape and systematically tape the whole surface of the material, pressing lightly. Use new tape often, then mount on the piece of tape on transparent film. Take an infection sample from the fabric by pressing the length of the tape harder against the fabric once, then mounting on transparent film. Okay? Fibers in hair. Yan. Example, the hair on the head. Tape systematically across the hair with fiber tape. Stick the length of the tape to the transparent film. Yan. If all materials cannot be removed, cut away piece of fabric. Yan, pag ganyan yan. For sample. Then collection and preservation of hair naman tayo. Hair on removable object. Remove the whole object. Visible hair. Hairs are collected with the help of tape that is attached to transparent film. Individual long hairs can be pulled out with forceps. Yan. Then collection and preservation of fingerprints. You have your fingerprint subject, so you should know that. Photograph the prints on the side. Pack in a way it is not damage visible. Okay? Do not cover the print with a tape or etc. Remember that there may also be latent prints on the same object. Photograph. Make a cast of the print with microseal if the underlying materials allows it. Okay? Colored and etched photograph or prints, you have to photograph it. Prints in dust, photograph it. Yan ang gagawin mo. Okay? Prints on dust, anong gagawin? Photograph. Okay? Fingerprints in blood. Try to achieve contrast by exposing to UV light. Photograph non-porous surfaces should be subsequently be treated. Yeah, okay. On removable object, yeah. On dry surfaces, if the print is fresh, try brushing with magnet powder. On wet surfaces, material should be treated by chemical methods. On wet non-porous, yan, pakibasa na lang yan. Okay. Then on wet porous, yan, immediately after control the surface drying, try brushing. Then collection and preservation of articles in clothing. Yan. Okay, so clothes or beddings, take all the material where possible. Mark the bedding to show which end is the head and which is the foot. Yeah. Absolutely dry clothes or beddings. General purpose, examining body fluids or injuries, place in bags. If the purpose is to examine gunshot, spread out the garment on the clean wrapping paper. Yeah. Okay. If the purpose is examine gunshot residue, spread out the garment on a clean wrapper paper, put clean wrapper paper on top of the roll, seal with tape. Pakibasa na lang yan. Wet or moist clothes, bedding. If the purpose is to examine body fluids, put each piece of material in a plastic bag, then put it in a paper packaging and seal with tape. Open and allow to dry and arrive at the police station. Avoid contamination. If the material is sent to the PNP crime laboratory, pack it in accordance with instruction. If aim is to look for flammable liquids, pack each type of material immediately in a fire bag. If the aim is to examine gunshot residue, the same as for drying clothes, see above. Materials loosened from clothing. All those whose clothing are to be seized must take off their shoes and stand on a piece of clean wrapper paper. Shoes and boots. Anong gawin mo? In a separate paper bag, socks that are folded and sealed with tape. Yan. Collection and preservation of latent footwear. Footwear print. Take the objects in the police station for further examination. On non-removable, search with very oblique light, photograph any prints, leaf prints as described on the previous page. Yeah. Okay, that is for latent footwear. Pag sinabing latent, mo yung latent, you have to, that is a print at the crime scene. Collection and preservation of soil, plant, construction materials. Soil from the crime scene, take about 10 samples of at least 2. Take about 10 samples, at least 2 from the question site and 8 from the surroundings within a radius about 3 to 4 meters. Yeah. Take samples at various depth where appropriate. Each sample should be consist of 0.05 dl. It is a good idea to photograph the site. Pakibasa na lang yun. Soil under a footwear print. When footwear prints are secured, let the soil sticking to the cast remains. Shoes, clothing, remove the whole object if possible. Do not touch any material. Ibasa na lang yan. Plant material from the crime scene. Yan. Take away the whole plant if possible. If there are any flowers or parts of the tent to stick on the clothes, make sure that they are included. It is good idea to photograph the site. Construction materials. Yan. Pakibasa na lang yan. Safe insulation. Yan. Collection of tool marks. Yan. Example, may dito sa number 2 in non-removable, may naitusok na knife doon sa wall. Then pag hindi maalis yan, then you have to cut it the place where it has been inserted. No? Okay, collect paint and wood. Cut marks, cut off the end of the wire or cable. Tools, never compare a tool with a question mark by placing it in the mark. Collection and preservation of glass. Yeah. For glass from the crime scene for reference purposes. For analysis purposes, remove a piece of glass at least 1 uh, centimeter, no, from each pane in the window. Yeah, the square centimeter. Uh, Glass from crime scene to establish from which side of the glass was broken. Yeah, saan mo ilalagay? Pack in a plastic tube or boxes. Pack in a cardboard box. Pakibasa yan. Glass from clothes and footwear. Yan ang gagawin. Okay. Then collection and preservation of paint. Collect paint flakes with scalpel. Include some of the material underneath if possible. Yeah. Collection and preservation of materials from fire scenes. Residual liquids, close the original. Anyway, you have your fire investigation. Yeah, close the original package bottle. It's undamaged and do not leak. Yeah. Pakibasa na lang yan. Yan. Okay. Collection and preservation of materials from explosion like bombing. Collect all residues of suspected explosive materials at the crime scene. In case of large quantities, send only pea-sized pieces for the PNP laboratory. Then package in a clean, dry glass vessels. Explosive remnants, yung mga natira sa pagsabog. Moisten a clean cotton glove or rag with acetone. Wipe surfaces that are suspected of being soiled with explosive. Let the glove or rag dry in an air for a few minutes. Then explosive, glass jar nilalagay, okay? Pag explosive remnants. Explosive packaging, collect all intact explosive packaging and fragments that are found at the crime scene. Detonators, undetonated or homemade detonators are to be recovered. Okay, batteries, electrical wirings, collect all the materials that may be connected with the bomb. Okay. Next, collection of preservation of firearms. The collection and preservation of firearms, this is common. Firearms found or received. Keep calm and take your time. Safety first. A safe shooter is a knowledgeable shooter. Do not forget that. Photograph the weapon on site. Where was it? Do not handle the weapon without gloves on account of fingerprints. Always point the barrel of the gun in a safe direction. Anong ginagawa natin sa firearms found or received? Wet or blood-stained weapons must be dried at room temperature and package it in a suitable box, not in a paper bag. Weapons found in water must be saturated with thin lubricating oil and sent to the PNP crime lab. The pistol naman, take out the magazine, leaving the cartridge inside. Yan, pag sinabing cartridge, that is ammunition that is live. Raise the slide catch lever and if possible, thump it up to the arrest the slide in the open position. Yan, para naka-open yan. Then the bolt is especially important. Okay? Double-barrel rifles point the weapon in a safe direction. That's the same. Yeah. Then other types of firearms. Bullets and cartridge cases. Bullets and cartridge cases must not be handled with tools that make marks, like pliers. Do not use that. Moist or blood-stained materials must be air-dried. Bear in mind the risk of blood infection from blood-stained materials. Anong ginagawa sa mga bullets? Wrap each bullet in kitchen rolls or similar materials and package in small plastic boxes. Write any notes on the box, never on a bullet or case. Bullet trapped in an object. Yan, yung mga na-trap sa isang object. Photograph the object in which the bullet is trapped together. Yan. Take away the whole object if possible and mark and place in a dry plastic. If the bullet must be uncovered on site, remove the material around the bullet carefully so that it cannot be detached without being touched. Okay? If possible, avoid damaging the entry hole. Knives and axes naman. Yan, hammers. Fasten the object in a cardboard fasten box so that it is not moved in transit. Do not use tape. Okay, so those are the procedures in the collection and preservation of evidence. Do not forget them. And to end that, do not forget this wisdom from John Marley. It is not enough to do good. One must do it the right way. Therefore, as investigator in the crime scene, you have to process it, collect and preserve evidence properly. Okay, to avoid contamination. Let us proceed further in the procedure for submitting evidence to the crime laboratory. Kasi pag may na-collect na evidence and preserve, ang pinupuntahan yan kung gagamitin mo as evidence for the crime involved, then sa crime laboratory for analysis. Okay? So there are situations where the investigator on case or even the first responder may have to collect evidence such as under tactical situations or those which otherwise would contaminate or destroy if it is remains uncollected. In such cases, all evidence collected under similar circumstances shall be turned over to the investigator on case with the proper documentation and description on how it was collected. The IOC shall then determine which evidence will need further laboratory examination. Request for it. The IOC shall observe the following procedures for the proper submission of evidence to the crime laboratory. A standard sample shall be collected by the crime laboratory as necessary for comparison. General information on the procedure for submitting evidence to the crime laboratory. Should there be any query pertaining to the laboratory services in your area, prior coordination with the crime laboratory office shall be made before submission of your evidence. This can often be cumbersome but can expedite the evidence reception process. Submit only items that need analysis. Be cognizant of the cross-contamination with regards to your packaging. All potential biohazard items must be plainly marked with biohazard stickers. The laboratory will not reanalyze evidence previously analyzed by an outside laboratory for the same type of examination. For paperwork, evidence submitted must be accompanied by 3 requests for examination of evidence. 3 request forms consisting of 1 original and 2 photocopies. Another copy will be presented by the police. So do not forget that. In addition, all biochem or DNA evidence requires a complete biochem form. Relative to this, refer to the DNA submission section. Ballistic cases must be accompanied by additional request examination of evidence. The original and all copies of the request for examination evidence forms will be individually signed by the person delivering the evidence. So evidence packaging, marking, and sealing for purposes of laboratory examination. Acceptable packaging containers depending on the type of evidence, includes paper bags, plastic bags, yan, boxes, manila envelopes, small glass vials, metal cans. Okay? Acceptable seals, tamper-proof evidence tape, reinforced packaging tape, and heat seal. Note, a package is considered as sealed if the contents are properly secured in place and the seal or container is not tampered. Manila envelope, class Ziploc bags, Ziploc, and staples do not constitute an acceptable seal. The person sealing the envelope shall place his initial or individual identifying across the seal or tape on the package. Information on his package should minimally include name of the agency case number, yeah, item number, date, investigator's identifier. Additionally, packaging of evidence should include where the item was found. Pwede mong include yan. By whom, date and time found, and description of the item. And with that, those are the collection procedures and preservation of evidence. That is the third part of crime scene investigation. And the fourth part of investigation or crime scene investigation is the so-called managing the investigation. Ito yung sinasabi ko kanina that investigation must be managed, no? But this part is when in murder and other crimes of violence that attracts media attention and public scrutiny. Yet it has been noted by the Chief PNP himself that there is lack of focus on the conduct of investigation. It is for this reason that the concept of activating SITG, the Specialized or Special Investigation Task Group, will ensure that there will be full-time investigators to handle the case and that a record or case management system is in place. As mandated, as an SITG shall be organized whenever a major case or crime of violence occurs. The SITG conduct aggressive, concerted, and sustainable programs of action through strengthening. So yan, ang SITG ginagawa lamang yan, I hope you understand, for these reasons. No? It attracts media attention and there is public scrutiny. And third, there is lack of focus on the conduct of investigation. And most importantly, the crime involved is murder and other crimes of violence. Okay? Organizational setup of the SITG shall be composed of the PNP provincial director or the city director of the province or city where the incident happened. Example, pag nangyari yan sa Alfonso Lista, then the provincial director of Ifugao will be the task group commander. While the provincial officer or chief of the local criminal investigation and detection unit or the CI of the DCIDG shall be the deputy task force or task group commander. The SITG shall be composed of the investigating team ng local police, technical legal support team, and administrative logistic team. Kaya kompleto yan. The investigating team shall be headed by the provincial officer or chief of the local SIDO of CIDG, who shall be this concurrent deputy task group commander. Yan. Okay? Pakibasa yan. The SITG shall have its own public information officer who shall be responsible for the daily press releases. Okay? However, this does not prevent the regional director from making press statements on the development of the investigation. The organizational chart, yeah. So the commander is the provincial or city director, walang municipal chief of police. Yan. Ang RD andyan sa taas yan. Okay? Yan. PIO, deputy commander. Yan. Technical, legal. So, kompleto yan. Yan. Team leader is the SIDO or the provincial officer. Yeah, local station investigator kasali diyan, no? CIDO, CLO, Crime Laboratory Office, Regional Investigation Officer, and the intelligence group. Yeah, okay. Organizational operation, the regional director shall immediately issue order organizing. Sino nag-i-issue? It is the regional director. Okay? Sino nagiging task group commander? It is the provincial director or city director pag city. The deputy regional director for operations shall supervise the SITG. The SITG commander of the area where the incident happened shall ensure successful investigation. Other members, yung provincial officer, yan, Investigation and Detective Management Bureau of the concerned PPO. Yeah. The members of the SITG team shall be detailed on full-time status. The SITG shall have its own public information officer. General operational procedure, initial action. Aside from the yan, ang gagawin na. Yan. The OSCP shall utilize is on the scene. Yeah, pakibasa na lang yan. Follow-up of actions na gagawin ng SITG. Yeah. Duties and responsibilities of SITG. Strictly observe the chain of custody. Always remember the chain of custody. Kasi titingnan yan ng korte. That will help you if you follow chain of custody. That will also give you credit or that will help you show the integrity of evidence. Okay. Case folder. Yeah. Ang case folder and then yung different reports, evidence. Yeah. Kaya tignan nyo ang SITG, pag yan ay in-establish, talagang there is no reason na hindi matatapos yung kaso in a successful manner kung gagawin nila yung trabaho nila. No? Yeah. So kung akong tatanungin, if there are crimes of violence that attracts that kind of attention media or hindi nabibigyan ng focus, yan, dapat mayroong SITG. So that pag may SITG, talagang all resources, logistics, experts, andyan, they will work as one and focus on the investigation until they will finish it. Okay, so that is the end of chapter 4 as far as crime scene investigation techniques and procedures. Okay. Chapter 5 will be the next topic on the medical legal aspects of death investigation, and that will follow in the next discussion. Okay, so I hope for the there are 4 parts of chapter 4. No, this is the last part of chapter 4. So I hope from my little and simple discussion, you are able to pocket something about the techniques of crime scene investigation. No? Okay, so thank you, and we will see you. Let us see each other on the next discussions. Okay, thank you, and God bless.